It's December 22nd, 1849, in the freezing cold of St. Petersburg. A 28-year-old writer is tied to a post, blindfolded and waiting to die. He has just been forced to kiss a cross, and a sword has been ceremonially broken over his head. The firing squad takes aim. Then a messenger bursts into the square. At the absolute last possible second, the Tsar commutes the sentence. The young men aren't going to be shot today. Instead, they are being sent to a brutal Siberian labor camp. This entire execution was a hoax, a calculated act of psychological torture designed by the Tsar to terrify political dissidents. For Fyodor Dostoevsky, standing a hair's breadth away from death shattered his early idealism. The trauma of that warning forged a lifelong obsession with the darkest, most extreme edges of the human soul. Dostoevsky entered the Siberian labor camps as a sheltered intellectual who theorized about the inherent goodness of the peasantry. He lived the next 4 years in shackles, surrounded by violent criminals who despised his education and social class. This raw exposure to human cruelty forced him to reconcile his abstract Western ideals with the grim reality of the Russian masses. When he finally returned to society a decade later, he found a Russia rapidly modernizing and obsessed with new theories. Intellectuals were promoting a highly mathematical, predictable vision of society, a flawless, bureaucratic utopia they called the Crystal Palace. Dostoevsky rejected this vision. His time in the labor camps proved to him that human beings are deeply, stubbornly irrational. He knew firsthand that the suffering, contradictory human soul could never be reduced to a neat, logical equation. Dostoevsky lived with a biology that mirrored the instability of his fiction. He suffered from severe epilepsy. His seizures often began with a fleeting, ecstatic aura of universal harmony, only to abruptly plunge him into an unimaginable hell of darkness and depression. This biological pendulum granted him a uniquely painful insight into human psychology. He also fought a crippling addiction to the roulette wheel. He frequently gambled his family into destitution, pawning his own wife's wedding ring to chase losses. This compulsive behavior kept him drowning in financial debt, forcing him to write at a breakneck pace just to survive. In 1866, he signed a predatory contract. If he didn't deliver a new novel in exactly 30 days, he would lose the publishing rights to everything he had ever written. In a frantic 26-day sprint, he dictated an entire book, appropriately titled The Gambler. He managed this impossible deadline with the help of a young stenographer named Anna Snitkener. Anna organized his chaotic life, helped him escape the contract, and eventually became his wife, offering the only real stability he would ever know. Between the seizures, the gambling debts, and the looming threat of ruin, Dostoevsky's literature was born. His brilliant, agonizing narratives emerged directly from his own pathological struggles, rooted deeply in lived trauma rather than abstract theory. He channeled this chaotic energy into his 1864 novella, Notes from Underground. This text was a direct philosophical strike against the hyper-rational social reformers of his day and their idealized Crystal Palace. Through the voice of his bitter, isolated protagonist, the underground man, Dostoevsky argues that if someone actually managed to build a perfectly calculated, flawless society, humanity would intentionally smash it to pieces. We would burn it to the ground just to prove we can. The argument is that humans will actively choose pain, suffering, and self-destruction over perfection, simply to prove we possess free will and aren't just mechanical piano keys played by the laws of nature. True freedom, in Dostoevsky's view, is inextricably tied to our own chaos. If you remove the capacity for irrational, destructive behavior, you remove the very thing that makes us human. He tested this idea further in Crime and Punishment. His protagonist, Raskolnikov, acts on a chilling theory. He believes he is an extraordinary man, someone who can logically justify murdering a pawnbroker if her money is used for a higher utilitarian good. But the perfectly rational murder falls apart. Raskolnikov's cold intellect is utterly crushed by the sudden weight of his own conscience. He is driven to paranoia, sickness, and deep psychological torment before eventually confessing and seeking redemption. If Crime and Punishment explores the failure of pure intellect, His later novel, The Idiot, explores the failure of pure innocence. Here, Dostoevsky introduces Prince Mishkin, a deeply compassionate, epileptic man designed to embody absolute goodness. Yet Mishkin's Christ-like naivete causes disasters of its own. When thrust into the greedy, corrupt society of St. Petersburg, his inability to navigate human malice ends up destroying the people he tries to save and drives him completely insane. Dostoevsky demonstrates that neither pure, cold logic nor untainted innocence can survive uncompromised in the real world. This tension culminates in his magnum opus, The Brothers Karamazov. Literary critics refer to this as a polyphonic novel. Instead of one central narrator preaching a single truth, Dostoevsky creates multiple, fully realized characters with opposing ideologies, letting them clash on equal footing. In the book's famous Grand Inquisitor chapter, the intellectual brother Ivan tells a parable where the church arrests Christ upon his return. The Inquisitor argues that humanity is actually too weak for Christ's spiritual freedom, preferring to trade their liberty for the security of a guaranteed piece of bread. It is an incredibly dark, airtight, rational argument against God. But Ivan's devout younger brother, Alyosha, doesn't counter it with logic. He simply leans forward and kisses Ivan. He offers no intellectual rebuttal, only radical, active compassion. By structuring his narrative this way, Dostoevsky captures the agonizing, unresolved contradictions of human nature. He doesn't give us a clean answer, because human beings are not clean equations. Dostoevsky died of a lung hemorrhage in 1881, leaving behind a body of work that would shape global literature and philosophy for the next century. His writing carries a specific warning about the logic of characters like Ivan Karamazov, who argue that if God is dead, everything is lawful. Dostoevsky feared that stripping away spiritual morality in favor of pure, cold efficiency would inevitably scale up from personal crime to societal collapse, predicting the rise of systems that justify mass violence for the well-being of the state. Decades before Jean-Paul Sartre or Friedrich Nietzsche formalized the concepts, Dostoevsky had already mapped the terrifying, lonely landscape of existentialism. Ultimately, his legacy is a defense of human complexity. He forces us to look at the ugliest parts of ourselves, showing that our capacity for irrationality and suffering is not a defect to be solved, but the defining evidence of our individuality.